Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen here with life coach Cindy Chavez. Today is Wednesday. Happy Neville Day. Wednesday, August the 14th, 2019. It is 4 p.m. in New York. That's 1 p.m. Los Angeles time. And let's see, that would be, can I do my math right? I think that's 9 p.m. London time and 6 a.m., 5 a.m. Tokyo time and 6 a.m. Sydney time, if my math is right. If I'm wrong, I apologize to those of you who live in those time zones. But wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us for another episode of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy. And I'm happy that Cindy has her power back this week. She's all powerful again.
I'm all powerful. I'm in New Orleans and everything is perfect. So,
all's right with the world now that the hurricane is past.
All's right with the world.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I hope that you came through it without any significant damage. I hope everything was fine.
This was nothing. This was just a little afternoon nothing.
Little
the hurricane that happened, we did come through with no damage, so that was good too. And I have to say, you just start thinking this way maybe when you live down here, but it's like, okay, we're halfway through August and we've only had one hurricane.
Yeah.
Because hurricane season's June through November, which
right.
About that, right? That's like a big chunk of the year. And so I'm kind of going, oh, hey, good.
Well, it's kind of like Wednesday. Wednesday is hump day. Well, this is halfway through the season, right? So it's hump month.
Yeah, so we've made it this far with no big storms. So that's a good thing.
That's a very good thing. And we're talking Neville today, which we haven't been able to do in a couple of weeks.
I'm telling you, I've been studying some things this week that aren't Neville. It's more Hermetic principles, but I keep seeing Neville there.
Yes.
Yeah?
I understand what you mean.
Oh, yeah. And, then sometimes I even recognize little things he says.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, he knew this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So, yeah, it's always exciting, and I always find something new in there to get excited about. So, and especially today's chapter. Like, I know we usually do announcements and things, so I'm not going to jump right in, but I'm excited already just knowing the title of the chapter. So,
well, then I better do the announcements, because otherwise you're probably just going to go into a dead faint if we don't get to the chapter title. But no, absolutely. And the announcements are important. As one of our listeners pointed out to me very recently, that we shouldn't treat them as, get them out of the way. No, these are important. And
right,
they're important is this is how we get more and more people to listen to LOA Today. And the good news, Cindy, is that approximately 85% of the people who listen to us are regular listeners. They're already subscribed. So that's the good news. The better news, we'll be getting the other 10 to 15% to subscribe as well. And they're the ones we're talking to right now. So if you're in that 10 to 15% group, we're talking to you and we're inviting you to get a free subscription. And it is truly free to LOA Today. And it's pretty easy to do. We are now on virtually all of the major podcast platforms that are available today. We're on iTunes, we're on Google Play, we're on Spotify, we're on Pandora, we're on all of them. But if you can't find us on the one that you use, really simple. Just go to the homepage of our website, loatoday.net, and right at the top of the page, you will see instructions on how to use your particular device that you use to subscribe and become a regular subscriber, so that every single time that we publish a new episode, it comes right to your smartphone. And by the way, you can also watch us on YouTube, because we live stream as we're doing our recordings to YouTube. You can follow us there. You can listen to the replay afterward, or you can listen to us live. And we love it when we have people who show up like Jeffrey. There's Jeffrey. He's already logged in. And join us in the conversation as we're doing the show. Just go to YouTube and do a search for LOA Today podcast videos, and we'll pop right up. And then be sure to click the subscribe button and click the little bell next to it so that you can get notified every single time that we're publishing something. So there are our promotional messages for the day. And now, Cindy, you can just, you can pop that cork, because we are ready to talk about Neville.
Open the champagne. We are ready to talk about Neville. And we are currently, actually, we're just at the beginning. Like, if you're just coming in, we're on chapter 3 of The Law and the Promise, Neville Goddard's book, The Law and the Promise. We're starting chapter 3 today. And chapter 1 and 2 we've covered, and so it would be really easy to catch up if you wanted to catch up.
That's it.
But the thing that excited me about this is, there's an idea that, and I recognize that as humans that live on Earth, we experience time as being linear.
Mm-hmm.
We all do, right?
Absolutely.
We go, back then I was born and I'm here now, and in the future I'm going to do whatever. And we have to some degree, that's how we order our life and make sense of things. Like, we can't just say, oh, everything happens now, and then know when to show up at the podcast.
That would be difficult.
For me, I've made an agreement with Walt. We're like, we'll be here at this time. So
I mean, it's like being late for work. You don't want to do that. First of all, you get fired, which will also affect you in your linear time frame.
Exactly. But we know, from a scientific perspective that time is not linear. And so when we talk about these methods that we use to consciously create things, this is one of the most amazing to me, mind-blowing, miraculous, advanced techniques, and that is, the title of the chapter is Turn the Wheel Backward. And we've talked before about, things that are bothering us, things that in our life that have an emotional charge, especially for me being a relationship coach, especially around relationship. Right. We had a conversation with someone that left us feeling less than wonderful. We can, in our mind, go back and imagine that conversation differently. Imagine that different things were said. Imagine that the outcome was different. Maybe we imagine it the way it happened, but that we worked it out better and we had a different outcome. And because we've just sort of made an imaginal change in the past, it affects the present and the future. And I have seen miracles happen with that technique right there. Just sure. That little thing. Actually, so have you, Walt, right?
Absolutely, I have. And in fact, it makes sense when you think about it, because what do we normally do with those memories? Normally, we just replay the memories over and over again.
Right.
So we just reinforce this thing that we didn't like so that it can produce even more things we don't like.
I remember reading some book. It was not Neville, because I think it was a newer book, and I can't remember who said it, but the comment, it might have been Pam Grout. But the comment that they made was that most of us are replaying, and I hate thinking about this comment. Most of us are replaying yesterday's news.
Yes, right.
And then we wonder why nothing new happens in our life. We wonder why we have no shift. We wonder why we're stuck in the same old place. But We're telling the same story, and it's yesterday's news, right? We tell everybody, right? We call another friend. Did I tell you what happened yesterday? Did I tell you the drama that it's like, oh my goodness. So Neville is like the master of this, turning the wheel backward. Let's go back and change it.
Change it, yeah. Don't just turn the wheel. Actually take advantage of the fact that you're back there.
It really seems wild because I think we all have this idea that it's just the way it is. Can't change the past. It happened and it happened, and that's the way it is. And it's like, well,
that's what we've been taught. So of course we come to that conclusion. And we're really trying to unlearn something that was pretty heavily ingrained in us. So
I tell you what, if you start reading Neville and really start trying to apply Neville, you're going to unlearn a whole bunch of stuff.
This is true.
Unlearn
Very
stuff
true.
You learned in school, stuff you learned in church, stuff you learned everywhere, right?
Be prepared to be completely shaken to your foundation.
Right. So turn the wheel backward. Let's dive in. He starts with a quote, as he often does. The different thing about this chapter is he so often starts with a quote that's religious in nature from a sacred book, very often the Christian Bible, sometimes other Bibles. But this one, he's quoting Sir John Collins Squire from The Birds. The quote just says, "Oh, let your strong imagination turn the great wheel backward until Troy unburn." Then he goes on to quote H.G. Wells. He says, "All life is, throughout the ages, nothing but the continuing solution of a continuous synthetic problem."
I love the fact that he quotes Wells, too, because Wells was known as a science fiction author who explored time. Yes. A lot of his novels were about going forward or going backward in time. So how appropriate that a chapter that's devoted to turning the wheel backward quotes H.G. Wells.
And I think it's so interesting that adjective there, not just the continuing solution of a continuous problem, the continuing solution of a continuous synthetic problem.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a myth, it's an illusion.
Mm-hmm. And we made it.
Yeah, exactly. And then he quotes George Meredith from Hymn to Color. It says, the perfectly stable or static state is always unattainable. The end attained objectively always realizes more than the end the individual originally had in view. This, in turn, creates a new situation of inner conflict, needing novel solutions to force man along the path of creative evolution. His touch is infinite and lends a yonder to all ends. We've talked about that a little bit before, that nothing is static.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even when we're in a place in our life where we feel stuck, as a coach, I have a lot of people reach out to me because they are feeling stuck.
Sure.
Right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
they go like, I've tried everything and nothing's changing and I'm stuck. And the thing we have to remember is that actually things are changing all the time, right? Because nothing's static. So it's a good reminder and it's sort of encouraging to remember that.
Right? Oh, it is encouraging.
That things are actually changing.
Yeah, because when we remember that, all of a sudden, it's almost like somebody turned on the possibility switch, right? Until you get that switch turned on, it feels like nothing can improve. But once that possibility switch gets turned on, it's almost like you get this flood of new information. Like, why didn't I think of that one 10 minutes ago?
Right? But, you know, that's the thing is that when we're in that stuck place, a lot of times we can't see out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of these kind of ideas are helpful for shifting. It's like
Right.
that's all that has to happen is we just have to shift a little bit. Because when we shift a little bit, we shift our perspective a little bit, everything has the potential to change. So these quotes.
By the way, I love the fact that you're using the word shift. I really like that a lot.
Yeah.
In part because very, very early on in the podcast, like around episode 10 or so, well, really early on, I interviewed a guy who was a stand-up comedian who had written a book called Get Your Shift Together. And it's exactly what he was writing about was this, you know, shifting everything, shifting your perspectives. So when you talk about that, I keep thinking about that interview.
Yeah. I told you the story about when it's been a few years ago when I was like, we were driving around downtown and I was thinking and I was like, I really want to generate a bigger cash flow. So, you know, it'd be great. We need to just come stay in a 5-star hotel and like act as if things are cash flow's a little bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, I said that, and 2 weeks later, through a series of what seemed to be unfortunate events, but they actually weren't because, you know, good luck, bad luck, who knows?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We ended up in a 5-star hotel, and it happened during one of the big floods that we had, but
Okay.
it ended up being covered by insurance, and we were there a month.
Wow. Wow.
But here's the really cool thing, is that
What, you mean that's not cool enough?
no, it gets better. It gets better. It gets better in the details, right?
Okay.
Because the whole reason why I said it was why, because I was like, I'd like to generate, you know, some bigger cash flow.
Sure.
We get there. This is a hotel that was made in an old bank building. And when we get there, they give us the key to our room and we go up to our room, and our room, the door to our room is painted to look like a bank vault. And
I love it.
like, are you kidding me? Right? And then we go in, and it's a beautiful room, and there's a full-length mirror, and on the mirror, etched into the mirror, it has a quote, which I believe is Wayne Dyer's quote. It says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And
Wow.
I had no idea. Like, I'd never stepped into this hotel before. I'd looked at it from the outside, and I've been, you know, in the restaurant there. I'd been like, I bet this would be a cool place to stay. But I had no idea what the rooms were like. That. And it was just kind of mind-blowing. It really was. And so, talk about a shift, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this one little shift.
Well, more than a shift. I mean, what you're talking about is an amazing manifestation.
Yeah.
I mean, you asked for help in a very specific way, and it gave you a mirror with the message you wanted to hear etched into the mirror in a room that you got for a month that was paid for by insurance. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, it was really cool. And actually then after that, things continued to shift. So the thing that I'd asked for, more clients or whatever, it's like it started to happen. Why? Because of one little shift I made in my thinking. And it was just, okay, let's just do this. Let's just shift things a little bit.
Well, I can tell you a story that just comes from today, actually. It's actually over a series of days, but the punchline, so to speak, comes from today. Louise and I are in the process of trying to attract home of our dreams into our lives, and we actually had been kind of putting it off for a bit because we were dealing with other stuff, but recently Louise got the bug, like, okay, let's really try to do something. Let's get out there. And as soon as she was saying that, I was realizing, we got to be careful here. This is where you try to make it happen, right? You try to force it to happen. So I was a little bit cognizant of that. The first place we went to was one she found online, and we have our realtor, by the way, is also a listener to the podcast. So he's a total LOA devotee. And Dave is wonderful. Anybody who lives in the Hartford, Connecticut area, Dave Pilen is your man for real estate. But Dave got us in, showed us it was a condo, and it was a bit of a disappointment, to be honest. The pictures were very artfully done to make it look bigger than it really was. It was pretty postage stamp size. So a bit disappointing. And then there was a second one in the complex, and it wasn't much better. And so kind of came away from it not feeling really good about it. Then some time passed, and Louise was getting kind of despondent, and so we started talking about different things going on in our lives, things to feel better about, things that are turning around and so forth. And so she started getting the bug again, did a little more searching, and found another place. So we went to look at this other place, and this one was much nicer. It got better. It was a big step up from the other one. In fact, it was nice enough that while we're not currently in a place where we could buy it, like if we're still on the market 6 months from now, we could actually have a go at it. So, we're starting to zero in on, having it within reach. And it just felt good to find a place because she had kind of gotten to the point where, oh God, we're never going to be able to find anything because we can't afford anything that we really, really like. Well, we found something we liked, Did it have everything we wanted? No, it didn't have everything, but it was a big improvement. And that's the point I want to make. There was a shift in our understanding about the improvement of it. Well, here's the punchline of it. And I don't think she's even made this connection. I just made the connection while you were telling your story. Today, we went out together to do a consult with one of her gardening customers or prospective gardening customers. And it actually went very quicker than most. So we went off to do some shopping afterward. We're in the supermarket, and she's pushing the cart, and she's got this big smile on her face, and she's looking at me and saying, look how fast I'm moving. And she's basically racing down the aisle. Now, anybody who has been listening to the podcast knows of the medical conditions she's gone through that have been really debilitating. She literally is just in the last few days, it's kind of like she said herself, she has shifted to a different level. And I know it's because we had got that process started through what we did with the home search. Now, have we gotten the home yet? No, the home hasn't shown up yet. But look at that chain of events that created this unexpected, wonderful result.
And when you shift in one area, often the shifts happen across all the other areas too.
Precisely.
That's what you're seeing. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's fun.
That's fantastic. Yeah, no, I love hearing it. And
so there's the LOA story for the day.
Right, and I feel like the words that came out of her mouth, look how fast I'm going, or a bit prophetic about how
right
could go. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. One of my friends actually told me one time that, and she's a total book nerd, right? Like all her degrees are around, education, library science, all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And she said she was looking for a place. And she found, and gardening, and she found this apartment, and it had a library, and she was like, what? And it had a garden, and it had everything she would ever want.
Wow.
And called about it. They told her they had just rented it to someone else. And she said her immediate response was, ooh, I'm getting close.
Perfect response.
I was like, that's the response you want, right?
Yes.
That's where you want to be. Not like, oh, no, the perfect place. I'll never find another place that perfect. And they rented it to someone else, which, would probably would have been my response, right?
Probably most of us, actually.
But she's like, oh, I'm getting close. And I was like, that's powerful.
That is powerful. Yeah. Talk about being in alignment to be able to make that response. That's really good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So let's dive in here. We covered our quotes and we talked about turning the wheel back, the title. And Neville says today's event, and this reminds me of what we just talked about yesterday's news. Neville says today's events are bound to disturb yesterday's established order. The creatively active imagination invariably unsettles a pre-existing peace of mind. The question may arise as to how, by representing others to ourselves as better than they really were, or mentally rewriting a letter to make it conform to our wish, or by revising the scene of an accident, the interview with an employer, and so on, could change what seems to be the unalterable facts of the past. But remember my claims for imagining. Imagining creates reality. What it makes, it can unmake. It is not only conservative, building a life from images supplied by memory. It's also creatively transformative, altering a theme already in being. The parable of the unjust steward, Luke 16:1-8, gives the answer to this question. We can alter our world by means of a certain illegal imaginal practice, by means of a mental falsification of the facts. That is, by means of a certain intentional imaginal alteration of that which we have experienced. All this is done in one's own imagination. This is a form of falsehood which not only is not condemned, but is actually approved in the gospel teaching. By means of such a falsehood, a man destroys the causes of evil and acquires friends, and on the strength of this revision proves, judging by the high praise the unjust steward received from his master, that he is deserving of confidence. Because imagining creates reality, we can carry revision to the extreme and revise a scene that would be otherwise unforgivable. We learn to distinguish between man, who is all imagination, and those states into which he may enter. An unjust steward, looking at another's distress, will represent the other to himself as he ought to be seen. Were he himself in need, he would enter his dream in his imagination and imagine what he would see and how things would seem and how people would act after these things should be. Then, in this state, he would fall asleep, feeling the way he would expect to feel under such circumstances. Would that all the Lord's people were unjust stewards, mentally falsifying the facts of life to deliver individuals forevermore. For the imaginal change goes forward until at length the altered pattern is realized on the heights of attainment. Our future is our imaginal activity in its creative march. Imagine better than the best you know. This just reminded me, I have to tell a story.
Okay.
Because I did this. Remember, we talked about this the last time we were together 2 weeks ago. And I got really excited about it because I was like, I haven't been doing this much.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a couple of days after that podcast, my son got into a bicycle accident.
Ooh.
On his way home, he rides his bike to work, and he doesn't live with me, so he's in another city. And he sent me a message, and he had, because I'm going to say boys will be boys, because I probably wouldn't have done this, and I didn't. But riding home, he went over a jump, and he didn't land it quite.
Oh, dear. Yeah.
Thought his foot was broken. Could not put any weight on it. Was supposed to work the next day, so got that taken care of, got someone to cover him. And so he had 4 days before he had to be to work. And the top of his foot was swollen up like a softball, and it was, and he couldn't stand on it at all. And I said, okay, I want you to imagine yourself as you're falling asleep tonight. I want you to imagine yourself landing that jump.
Very
I
nice.
want you to imagine yourself riding home, taking that jump and landing it. Because he said to me, I've landed that jump so many times. Like, I don't know what happened, right? I said, well, then you know what it's like to land it. I want you to just imagine yourself landing it. And then we also used EFT, which is tapping, right? Because of all those thoughts you have when something like this, oh my gosh, why did I miss that? How did I miss it? You know, blah, 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 beating yourself up about, oh, now I'm going to miss work and all of that. So I started tapping for him, surrogate tapping, as if I were him. I was just tapping on all the spots, and I was saying, oh, I can't believe that I missed that jump. Oh, I can't believe that this, oh my goodness, you know, I was just going through it, right? All the tapping points.
Did he know that you were doing this?
Yes.
He did, okay.
Yes, because weird background to that is that when he was much younger and his brother used to be a professional cyclist, we would go to races, and when his brother was struggling, when he would come by us in the crowd, he would do this with one hand. He would mean tap for me. I'm struggling. And his brother, the one I was tapping for, would start tapping.
Okay.
And he would come around the next time and he would give us a thumbs up. Everything. His heart rate was wrong. He would go tap. So we have this like 10, 12-year history of them knowing the power of
right.
Right?
Yeah.
So I said, you just keep imagining landing the jump, tapping when you feel like you can tap it. I'll just be tapping over here. And then I started imagining every night for the next 2 nights when I would fall asleep, I imagined calling him on a special phone, right? I would be like, how are you doing? And he would say to me, oh, I'm doing great. Rode my bike home from work last night, sleeping well. And he'd never mentioned that he got in a wreck because it didn't happen.
Yes.
So day number 3, he sent me a message and said, unbelievably fast healing. And he's been back to work like nothing happened.
Wow. Very good.
So
Very
I forgot about it. And I want to always remember to kind of share these things like you just shared your story because they're happening right now. It's like
they are. And I love the fact that that's a story. What you call it, surrogate tapping. Basically, you providing energetic support to what he was trying to do. He was trying to heal himself.
Right, because one of the things I know, well, first, there's so many stories of surrogate tapping, and we've experienced it as a family. My son that was a cyclist called me one day, and I was in the living room with 2 of my friends who also knew about tapping at the time, and I had taught them how to tap, right? He called me, and he said, I'm out, way out in the country on my bike, and a bunch of yellow jackets got into my helmet.
Oh, dear. Wow.
And I said, oh my gosh, okay. And I told all my friends and we all started tapping.
Wow.
And he was fine. So I've seen the power of like tapping for someone else. And so, yeah, what I know is that when it's you that's really needing it, sometimes it's hard to do.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I mean, I've laid in bed with a migraine going, I know tapping would help, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it, right? Sometimes when it's you, it's hard. And so we can support each other that way. And so, yeah, I just pretended I was him. All the stories that I would be telling myself if I didn't land the jump and if I got hurt, I don't know if they're the same stories he would tell, right? But I just stepped into it and pretended.
It almost doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter. Because what really matters is the energy of it. And the energy was perfect. That's
the
really
what was a healed foot, right?
Exactly. That's all you really have to do is hit that mark and you're there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. So that's where we're going right here. Neville says to revise the past is to reconstruct it with new content.
That's it.
That's what we did.
Yep.
Man should daily relive the day as he wished he had lived it, revising the scenes to make them conform to his ideals. I'm telling you, if you can do that every night as you fall asleep, go back over the day and just construct it with new content, it'll change your world.
I should be trying that more often now that you say it.
Yeah, me too. For instance, suppose today's mail brought disappointing news. Revise the letter. Mentally rewrite it and make it conform to the news you wish you had received. Then, in imagination, read the revised letter over and over again, and this will arouse the feeling of naturalness, and imaginal acts become facts as soon as we feel natural in the act. This is the essence of revision, and revision results in repeal.
Repeal.
Now we're going to hear about a story from someone that did this.
Before you tell the story, I want to share one thought. Earlier on, he was talking about this kind of rewriting of the past as being a form of a falsehood. And I just wanted to address that for a moment. Because the word falsehood has sort of a negative connotation to it. And it can be kind of uncomfortable. I don't want to tell a lie. Why would I want to lie, you know? Now, I'm going to say something that isn't, I'm not speaking for Neville. I'm not speaking for you. I'm speaking for me, from my perspective, from what you might call my ethical perspective. For me, there's a difference between lying or telling a falsehood for the purpose of deceiving someone else.
Yes.
Versus trying to reprogram the way I'm understanding something. And when I think of it that way, I don't even think of it as a falsehood. I just think of it as a rewriting. Like, I'm just playing the scene differently. That's all. I don't think of it as telling a lie. I think of it as I'm telling it what the new truth is going to be. And it's my truth that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a truth for somebody else. I'm talking about my truth. And for me, that approach works really nicely because now I don't have to worry about, oh God, am I lying to myself? No, I'm not lying to myself. I'm simply changing the way I'm thinking about something.
I'm so glad you brought this up because at the beginning of the podcast today, I actually had the same thought that it was good to address this. Yeah. Because, you know, to me, it's a little bit like the difference between privacy and secrecy, right? Like we all should be able to keep private things that we want to keep private.
Right.
For no other reason that it's important to us. It feels like something private. Like some people may be very private about their personal spiritual beliefs.
Sure.
They wouldn't get on a podcast like this and just talk about how they.
Well, for good reason. There are plenty of people who could give them a hard time about it.
Well, and that's fine. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between privacy and secrecy. If I'm keeping something a secret because I know it would hurt you or wrong you in some way, you know, like that, then no, that's not secrets. Secrets never help relationships, right?
I agree.
But there are plenty of things we keep private and we should have the right to keep them private. And I think about that like this, you know, but what's funny is that I have a friend and she is the LOA coach and she is so good at scripting.
Oh.
And a couple of times I've been on the phone with her just chit-chatting about something and then hung up and realized, wait a minute, was she scripting? Or was that really what's going on? Because she does it with like effortlessly, right? So I think that you're right. I agree with you on that. Is that it's kind of like affirmations, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's like some people have trouble with affirmations because they feel like they're lying to themselves.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And in that case, we can just change it up to, you know, I'm in the process of whatever the affirmation is or something like that. But I like this because all we're doing is imagining something. No one can, you know, there's no crime in imagining anything. It's just all in our head.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we lay down to sleep, if we want to imagine the letter that we got said something different that feels better, I think we have every right to do that. Now it's different if we tell someone else, hey, I got a letter in the mail today and I got accepted to Harvard. Maybe that would feel like a lie.
well, that's where it gets a little bit dicey, I have to admit. And I remember even doing a podcast on this subject one time, but just recently, Louise and I were talking about something. We have ongoing discussions about our future and where we're trying to get to, what we're trying to attract into our lives. And of course, one of the things that we're trying to attract is greater income, you know, more financial independence and so forth. And toward that end, I've been scripting a few particular things, one of which had to do with our podcast, the fiction podcast, The Grass is Greener. I had been doing such a good job. She believed that I actually had already accomplished it. And when at one point she was like banking on it, I said, wait a minute, it hasn't manifested yet. You know, I'm still working this one, right? Now work with me here.
That's what I'm talking about. See, you're achieving that level of like,
right. Oh. I mean, I know it's coming. It's not quite here yet. So let's not bank on it just yet, you know, but
you know what's great about that is what Neville just said, is that when we achieve a naturalness,
right.
And you're talking about having a conversation with someone who's been married to you for years and knows you better than probably anybody on the planet.
Right.
And it was so natural for you that she just believed it. Right?
Exactly.
It's
exactly.
like, that means, oh, you're getting close.
It's potent stuff. There's no doubt about it. It's very potent stuff. And it's also stuff, how do I want to say it? It's stuff that the closer we get to it, the closer we get to that place of it being natural, it's almost like we slide into a nether zone where on the one hand we know what the reality was, on the other hand we know what the reality is that we're going for. That's where it starts shifting into that natural state. And it can be a little bit uncomfortable there because there's that piece of us that remembers the old and is remembering this new thing that we're creating. And it's like it just feels uncomfortable because it's two things that seem to be contradicting each other, occupying the same space, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And because we are wired to be worried about change.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's like our primal brain doesn't like change. And when that change starts getting closer, sometimes, right? It gets
a little nerve-wracking.
So Neville says this is the essence of revision, and revision results in repeal. And he's going to tell us a story. It sounds like it's all in quotes. So it's telling me this is a letter he received.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a person with the initials FB. So he says this is exactly what FB did. And here's the story. So let's see how he handled the scripting here. It says, late in July, I wrote to a real estate agent of my desire to sell a piece of land which had been a financial burden to me. His negative reply listed all of the reasons why sales were at a standstill in that area, and he forecast a bleak period of waiting until after the first of the year. This cracks me up, right?
It cracks me up, too, because I have an experience like this, but I can't wait to hear the rest of it.
I received his letter on a Tuesday, and in my imagination, I rewrote it with words indicating that the agent was eager to take my listing. I read this revised letter over and over, and I extended my imaginal drama using your theme of the four mighty ones of our imagination from your book, Seed Time and Harvest: the producer, the author, the director, and the actor. In my imaginal scene as producer, I suggested the theme, the lot is sold for a profit. As the author, I wrote this simple scene, which to me implied fulfillment. Standing in the real estate office, I extended my hand to the agent and said, "Thank you, sir." And he replied, "It was a pleasure doing business with you." As director, I rehearsed myself as actor until that scene was vividly real, and I felt the relief which would be mine if the burden were really lifted.
Mm-hmm.
3 days later, the agent I had originally written phoned me saying he had a deposit for my lot at the price I had specified. I signed the papers in his office the next day, extended my hand, and said, "Thank you, sir." The agent replied, "It was a pleasure."
It's a pleasure doing this for you.
5 days after I had constructed and enacted an imaginal scene, it became a physical reality and was played word for word just as I had heard it in my imagination. The feeling of relief and joy came not so much from selling the property, but from the incontrovertible proof that my imagined drama worked.
I had a very, very similar experience, and I'll tell you the story. This dates back to the first year that Louise and I met. At that time, I owned a condo. It was in a town that was near where we lived, but it wasn't adjacent to it. And we ended up moving even further away so that it was about an hour's drive away. But I still owned the condo. I mean, and I was still paying the rent and, not the rent, but the mortgage and dealing with taxes and all that kind of stuff. And really needed to get out from underneath that because that was just eating up a whole bunch of extra income. So I knew I wanted to sell it. I also knew that the real estate market at that time was flat, just the way they described in this story. There was nothing really moving. I knew what the likely value of the property was based on what the real estate agents would tell me. And indeed, I reached out to, and I didn't know anything about law of attraction at the time. So I did it the old fashioned way, right? I just reached out to a bunch of agents and I was asking them, what do you think I can get for this? And they were all saying the same range. And I don't know exactly how I made the shift, but I made the mental shift to no, I'm not going to accept that storyline. I'm going to believe somehow that there's an agent out there who can sell it at a higher price, more in line with what I have in mind. And what I had in mind was a good, almost 40, 50% higher than what they were saying. So it was a significant difference. Now, this wasn't a really, really high priced condo. So, 50% was like, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, that kind of thing. But still, it was significant, right? So anyway, I reached out to another agent. Now, I had reached out to like 10 or 11, and they were all giving me the same story, right? I said, no, this time I'm going to reach out to somebody and I'm going to get a better story. And I have no idea why I even said that. Because like I said, I was not a deliberate creator at that point. I didn't understand law of attraction. But for whatever reason, I decided to do that. And I reached this agent who lived in New Haven, Connecticut, which was south of where we lived, and told her my story, told her what I wanted to do. And as I'd also told others, I had told everybody that I was having a construction crew come in to basically clean some stuff out and repaint all the walls and lay new carpeting and, just basically give the whole thing a nice facelift. And I said, what do you think I can get for it? And she came in with a price that was actually higher than what I had in mind.
Oh.
I said, well, okay, that sounds good. That sounds good to me. Let's go for that. So I was ready to sign. And I said, how long do you think it'll take? Now, the others had told me, probably about 4, 5, 6 months. That's where the market's at right now. And she says, we can probably have it done within a month. I said, okay, I'm game. Let's go for it. She listed it. We got an offer within 10 days. Within 2 weeks, we were done. The whole thing was sold. And the offer came in within I think 5% of this really high price she had set.
Wow.
So I actually ended up selling it for more than I thought I was going to get for it, which was really cool.
So you're saying, I didn't know anything about law of attraction back then, but your higher being did.
No doubt about that. Yeah.
Yourself was like, no, we're not.
My logical self may not have been clued in, but the rest of me was.
that higher, wiser self, no, we're not going with these. We want more and we want it now.
We want it now, right?
Not in 6 months. Good grief. So Neville says about FB, if the thing accomplished were all, how futile. But FB discovered a power within himself that can consciously create circumstances. By mentally falsifying the facts of life, man moves from passive reaction to active creation. Which this reminds me of the story you just told.
Yes.
Because you could have reacted, a passive reaction says, okay, that it is what it is. This is what they're all telling me.
Right.
This breaks the wheel of recurrence and builds a cumulatively enlarging future. Ooh, I like that phrase.
Mm.
If man does not always create in the full sense of the word, it is because he's not faithful to his vision, or else he thinks of what he wants rather than from the wish fulfilled. So that, again, I remember having this this experience, and I don't even remember what I was creating at the time. I just remember that suddenly realizing that every time I thought about it, it was like something out in the future, something out there.
Right.
And I quickly realized, no, that's not going to work. And so I brought it in and started thinking from my wish fulfilled. And that made all the difference. So he says, man is such an extraordinary synthesis, partly tied by his senses and partly free to dream that his internal conflicts are perennial. The state of conflict in the individual is expressed in society. Life is a romantic adventure. To live creatively, imagining novel solutions to ever more complex problems is far nobler than to restrain or kill out desire. All that is desired can be imagined into existence.
That's so true. That is so true.
So he quotes from the book The Pilgrim's Progress by John Lennon.
By the way, before you do there, I got to quote what Jeffrey said in our live stream. He says, I love that a complicated chapter comes with real life examples. I know exactly what you mean, Jeffrey.
Yes, right. I'm having fun today because I'm excited we got to give our real life examples.
We have our own ones. That's right. Yeah.
So he says, wouldst thou be in a dream and yet not sleep? Try to revise your day every night before falling asleep. Try to visualize clearly and enter into the revised scene, which would be the imaginal solution of your problem. The revised imaginal structure may have a great influence on others, but that's not your concern. The other influenced in the following story is profoundly grateful for that influence. That's a really good point to make. And I talked about this today to someone, that is the idea of, and we're talking about falsification, but my conversation was about telling the truth.
Mm.
And that if we would just decide to tell the truth, it will revolutionize our life. And
Yes.
so often we don't tell the truth because we're worried about the effect on others.
Mm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even talking about big things. I'm talking about small things.
Sure.
Right? If someone asks us for something and we really want to say no, but we say yes because we're worried about how they feel.
Mm-hmm.
Or, just small things like that. If we will just begin to decide that we're just going to tell the truth about things, it will change everything.
It does.
Right? And that's the thing, is that when we set our standards there, everything starts to fall in line with that. Because we're being honest and we're staying in our integrity. And that's really important for a conscious creator. And we can still script. We can still imagine fictional outcomes. That does not contradict what I'm saying. But when we are speaking about things, to be able to, we don't have to, I'm not saying that we should let every single thought in our head come flowing out with no filter. I'm not saying that we should be unkind. I'm not saying that we need to share every detail of our inner and outer experience with anyone that crosses our path. No, because privacy is a thing and we have places to be private.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can start being real about what we want, so many times I ask a client, what do you want? And they can't even tell me.
What you're describing is exercising an option. That's the way I would look at it.
Yeah.
Because we always have that option to really say what it is that we need to say, what we need to express, to put out to the universe so that we can be focused on what we really want. That option is always available to us. Doesn't mean we always have to exercise the option. I mean,
right.
Like you gave some great examples of where we might not choose to exercise the option. It's just not as desired as we would originally think because there's these consequences that we don't like so much. But we always have the option, and that's the point. We get to choose when we're going to do this. We get to choose when we're going to make up the new story, falsify.
But so many times, those consequences we don't like, they're perceived consequences.
And they're all perceived because
right?
they haven't happened yet.
and they aren't even real.
Right.
So this is, I think we might go here in this story.
Okay, let's find out.
LSE writes, last August, while on a blind date, I met the man I wanted to marry. This happens sometimes, and it happened to me. He was everything I had ever thought of as desirable in a husband. 2 days after this enchanted evening, it was necessary for me to change my place of residence because of my work. And that same week, the mutual friend who had introduced me to this man moved away from the city. I realized that the man I had met probably did not know of my new address, and frankly, I was not sure he knew my name.
That's a little disturbing, but go ahead.
Yeah, they were going to
What were they talking about?
We probably should keep in mind, too, that this book was written decades ago. So,
It really was, yes.
because now we just go on the internet and find whoever we find, or
Right.
We look them up on Facebook or something. Like, seriously, the night that I met my husband, an hour after I met him, it was not a blind date, but I just met him somewhere. An hour after I met him, he sent me a friend request on Facebook, right?
Ah, yes.
It wasn't any problem that he was going to, forget where I lived. But
Exactly.
50 years ago, it's different.
It was.
Okay, so she says, and frankly, I was not sure he knew my name. After your last lecture, so she's writing to Neville.
Right.
After your last lecture, I spoke to you of this situation. Although I had plenty of other dates, I could not forget this one man. Your lecture was based on revising our day, and after speaking to you, I determined to revise my day every day. Before going to sleep that night, I felt I was in a different bed, in my own home, as a married woman, and not as a single working girl sharing an apartment with 3 other girls. I twisted an imaginary wedding band on my imaginary left hand, saying over and over to myself, "This is wonderful. I really am Mrs. J.E." And I fell asleep in what was a moment before a waking dream.
Mm-hmm.
Neville talks about this a lot.
He does.
Right? I repeated this imaginary scene for 1 month, night after night. The first week in October, he found me. On our second date, I knew my dreams were rightly placed. Your teaching tells us to live in the end of our desire until that desire becomes fact. So although I did not know how he felt toward me, I continued night after night living in the feeling of my dream realized. The result? In November, he proposed. In January, we announced our engagement, and the following May, we were married. The loveliest part of all, however, is that I am happier than I ever dreamed possible, and I know in my heart he is too.
That's a great story.
Really sweet love story, right?
Yeah, that's a nice one. I like that.
By using her imagination radically instead of conservatively, by building her world out of pure dreams of fancy, rather than using images supplied by memory, she brought about the fulfillment of her dream. Common sense would have used images supplied by her memory, and thereby perpetuated the fact of lack in her life. Imagination created what she desired out of a dream of fancy. Everyone must live wholly on the level of imagination, and it must be consciously and deliberately undertaken. Then he quotes Shakespeare from A Midsummer Night's Dream. Lovers and madmen have such seething brains, such shaping fantasies, that apprehend more than cool reason ever comprehends.
I got to ask a question here. Is this the first time that we've encountered Neville describing lack and using the word lack? I mean, that's an Abraham concept. And I'm wondering if we've run into him doing that before, because when he was saying that, I was thinking, wow, Abraham.
Yeah, we have, but not too often.
Well, he has used it in other books, so this isn't the first time. Because as far as I'm concerned, it's very noteworthy.
What's interesting, that sentence, right? Because he says common sense would have used images supplied by memory, and that would have perpetuated lack.
Yes.
And that's so true. That's what we've talked about so many times, especially when we were doing the Abraham books, is that two sides to the same coin.
Right.
People say, no, because I think about money all the time. We're like,
well,
money or the lack of money? Are you thinking about, no, I don't have a problem with money. I think about money all the time. Well, I mean, my bank account's empty, and I think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we're talking because you're thinking really about the lack. But it's interesting that he ties that to images supplied by memory instead of going into the imagination.
Well, it's a valid point, because it's actually one of the more difficult things about learning to be a deliberate creator, because our tendency is to draw on our own experience. And if we don't have experience with whatever the X is that we're trying to attract, we really don't have the right images to work with. So it's a really important point that he's making, that if you're not using the right images, you're going to be attracting the wrong thing. Most of your images are probably already oriented toward the lack of whatever that thing is that you're trying to attract.
Right. That's why I love this whole method of rewriting things.
Yeah.
Rewriting it, just completely different. There's one sentence that he used way back that I thought was so perfect, where he talked about creating new content. Just create new content.
Yeah. And it's a great method, because it's also a development of a skill. I mean, literally what we're talking about is trying to learn how to do something that originally we thought we couldn't do.
Yeah, and so we should talk about that for a second, because it's really important to recognize that it's like anything else. It's a skill, and knowing that something is a learned skill, to me, is really encouraging. Like people that tell me they can't draw, right? And I've asked several people this, and that is, I've told them, get a sketchbook, and every morning spend an hour drawing in your sketchbook. In a year, you won't believe what you can draw. Because why? Because drawing is a learned skill. Some people do seem to be born with a talent where they can pick up a pencil and just draw anything, but anyone can learn it, right? And that's like this. So don't get discouraged. We should never get discouraged when we try to do this and it's hard, because it's hard. It can be hard at first, to stay on track, to keep our mind from wandering, to remember to do it. I mean, I've been doing this stuff for decades, and I still forget. Like, when I'm reading, I go, oh my gosh, I forgot about that method. Yeah, I need to do that, So that's what happened 2 weeks ago. I remember telling you, like, oh my gosh, I haven't been doing this. I need to do this. And then I got an opportunity.
And you took advantage of it. That's really the key thing. And I say the key thing because when we start a habit like this, that's what we're talking about here. Whether we're talking about affirmations or meditation or any other exercise or just doing this, what he's just describing here, we're developing a new habit. And in the process of developing that new habit, we are also rewriting our understanding and our experience about what happens when we change our habits. Just by doing it.
Yes.
That's why you said, if you want to learn to draw, just draw in a sketchbook for a year. Do it every single day. And by the end of the year, you'll be able to draw. Well, it's because you are shifting that pattern.
Yeah.
Every single day.
Even telling that story. I can't draw.
Right. Even if you're just nudging it along, it's still a nudge. You're 1 millimeter closer to where you wanted to be just that one day.
So with this kind of method, sometimes, I know I've even decided, okay, I need to start remembering this. I need to do this method every night.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm falling asleep, I need to rewrite my day. And then sometime in the next 10 days, as I've been doing it, all of a sudden realize, oh, I don't think I did it the last few nights.
Right.
It's like, I got so tired and I just went to bed. I forgot all about it. Yes. And what do you do then? Well, it's like meditating. You say, oh, okay, tonight I got to remember. Or you give yourself some kind of clue to remember.
Mm-hmm.
You say, there's a glass of water next to my bed. And every time I take a drink from it, I'll remember. Connect it to something. Stack it on another habit. But don't get discouraged if you forget or if you have trouble. It's like I tried to imagine that letter saying a different thing, and the next thing I knew, I was thinking about, something else. That's bringing your mind back under your control.
That's exactly what it is. In fact, I'm reminded that when we have one of those times, like you described, having a time where you just didn't feel like you could do it. You just couldn't feel like you could do the method. You knew that there was something you should be doing. You even knew what it was, but you just couldn't bring yourself to do it. When that happens, don't worry about it. It's not like you're stuck there forever. So give it another day, and probably tomorrow morning, all of a sudden you'll find you can do it again. The main thing is, like you like to say, don't get down. Don't beat ourselves up about it.
Don't beat yourself up about it. This is why I think I get so much when you talk about when you were having the knee pain.
Oh, yeah.
I know how difficult that is, even for 1 second, because when you do and the pain is yours, it's like, I know what I'm supposed to do, and I just
I just can't do this. I can't.
So, it's all a learning process, and practice is really important. We live in a world where our attention is pulled in 100 directions. We've got all kinds of media going on. We've got phones that ring and podcasts that we pay attention to and televisions. And, it's like from every direction.
We have cars running by the window while we're doing the podcast.
I live on a really busy street. No sirens yet today. So
yeah, how about that?
But that's the thing, is that we need to recognize that there is a skill to this.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we're reading Neville's stories, and it is simple, but it's not always easy.
Mm-hmm.
So we read these, it's like, wow, that's awesome. But then we have to, it doesn't work in theory. It works in practice. So we have to practice, and it might take some practice to get there. And it's okay. Be gentle with yourself and just keep going.
But as your illustration of learning how to draw illustrates very clearly, practice does make perfect. You get better at it. Mm-hmm. Even if you can't see that you're getting better at it, you still get better at it just by trying again every day. Just try again a little bit more. And then, okay, you couldn't do it today. Well, just try again tomorrow. Just keep trying again tomorrow, every single day.
Keep going.
Yeah. Because eventually, all of a sudden, you reach a point where you say, whoa, I've actually gotten better at this.
Right. Well, you look back at the beginning pages of the sketchbook from, months ago and think, wow.
That's the way it feels with playing an instrument.
Through a year ago are terrible.
I mean, we both have the shared experience of having learned musical instruments. Playing the piano for the first time. The first few times that you're playing it feels awkward. Your fingers hurt, your hands hurt, everything feels uncomfortable. But you keep at it, and finally you reach a point where you say, my hands don't hurt anymore. And the music actually sounds a little bit more like music now. Or you decide, I don't need to do bar chords. Yeah, right. I don't have to do bar chords, right? My own personal decision, because they're hard. Actually, bar chords weren't hard for me. That wasn't the hard part.
Yeah, your hands are not probably as small as mine are.
Exactly. Yeah, I have long fingers, so mine were perfect for guitar. But for piano, and even for piano, they were good. But the thing that always got me with the piano was, you know, how the back of your hand, when you're not used to doing all the different exercises and so forth, your back of your hand gets really, really, really sore. And I used to get frustrated, like, why are my hands so sore? I don't understand this. And then the day came when they weren't sore anymore. I said, whoa, that's pretty cool.
Well, we did not make it through chapter 3, but we had a good time.
We did. Well, and there's a lot more left in chapter 3 that's good stuff, too. So that kind of makes it even more fun looking forward. Before we go, though, you got to tell people how to reach Cindy Chavez, the life coach, because she is a great relationship life coach. Yes,
I would love for you to reach out to me if you need some coaching. You can find me on my website, cindychavez.com, CINDIECHAVEZ.com. There's a contact form there. I'd love to hear from you.
And with that, we'll say thank you very much. We look forward to you joining us for next Neville Day, next Wednesday.
Yeah.
Of course, tomorrow is Joel Elston and Alex King, so be sure to tune in for that. Thank you to our live streamers. Thank you to our podcast listeners as well. And we will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.